You were told Minnesota was an isolated incident, a regional problem, a one-time scandal. Well, that, of course, was a lie. The same investigators who exposed the fraud in Minnesota are now turning their attention west, and what they're finding in California makes Minnesota look like a rehearsal. Billions gone, ghost operations, political protection at the highest levels. Gavin Newsom is in panic mode. He watched what happened to Tim Walz. He knows he's next, and the evidence is about to go public. Now, the numbers coming out of California are almost impossible to believe. $32 billion in unemployment fraud ignored despite repeated warnings. Now, that's 32 billion. What we were looking at in Minnesota was 19. Okay, and that's just one section of the fraud. Now, those unemployment fraud dollars ignored despite repeated warnings. State auditors flagging it years ago, nothing was done. Now, that alone is being called the biggest fraud scandal in U.S. history. Worse than Minnesota. And they called that the worst in U.S. history. But it gets worse. An estimated $76 billion in alleged fraudulent spending across state programs. Kevin Newsom spent $24 billion supposedly solving homelessness. That's roughly $170,000 per homeless person. Enough to buy each of them a house. They said the streets of Los Angeles look like a third world country. Drug addiction, encampments, garbage everywhere. Where did the money go? Local officials are now revealing that California's homeless task force, the body deciding who gets funding, is stacked with NGO leaders who directly benefit from the cash. The same people handing out our money are the ones receiving it. And breaking right now, let me ask you something. If the power went out tonight, if stores were empty tomorrow, would you be ready? Most people aren't. That's why I recommend My Patriot Supply. Right now, they have a special deal on the 3-month emergency food kit. You'll save $100. But only while supplies last. The kit gives you over 2,000 calories a day for 90 days, real meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, drinks, and snacks packed in sturdy buckets. Lasts up to 25 years. Made in the USA, no MSG, no junk, fast free shipping, 30-day return policy, and a disaster replacement guarantee. When disaster strikes, your family will be eating 3 meals a day, and you'll be the hero who made it happen. Go to preparewithgary.com right now. That's preparewithgary.com. Now it gets darker. The investigators have uncovered ghost daycares in California, much like what we saw in Minnesota. They were licensed on paper, but non-existent in reality. That's even scarier. Nick Shirley showed us the ones that actually had brick and mortar operations, couldn't spell their signs right. But now we're learning that these in California don't even exist, but they're just on paper. They use to siphon public funds. Now, check out this meme here. I think it tells you everything you need to know. You see, they were used to siphon public funds, and according to licensed private investigators, records related to these schemes are being hidden at the highest levels of state government. And that there's the high-speed rail disaster. Newsom promised a bullet train from San Francisco to L.A., 220 miles an hour, 3 hours end to end. 17 years later, taxpayers have little more than paperwork and a request for $100 billion more. That deadline passed years ago. Tracks aren't even fully down. The money vanished. Benny Johnson says that what they've uncovered will outrage every taxpayer in America. Newsom watched what happened to Tim Walz, and now he knows he's next. Fraud is the career killer. So let's get into this right now. Here is former California State Representative Bill Assail calls it sedition. He's a current U.S. State's Attorney for Central District of California, confirms beyond a shadow of doubt Gavin Newsom let illegal aliens register to vote through the California website of the DMV. Unreal. That's another scandal. Representative Florida Rep. Maria Elvira Salazar exposes California Rep. Maxine Waters taking multiple trips to Cuba to visit Fidel Castro. These people are communists. Here is what Benny Johnson posted 24 hours ago. This is what Democrat leadership has done in L.A. Drug addicts, homeless, garbage everywhere. Looks like a third world country. Hundreds of millions towards homeless. And this is the outcome. So where did the money go?
Right off. We're going to pop up right here. Excuse me. Thank you very much. so I can give you guys a little bit more accurate feeling of what it feels like to ride through here. Got my light off, and we're creeping. Here's how we're looking. Wow. Go ahead and get off this sidewalk. Here we are. Let me show you guys what this is like after dark. It's a whole new scene. It's a lot different than it is during the day, to say the least. Squeeze my way through. But you know, as long as you mind your business, you don't really have much of a problem. Just want to keep on rolling. It's actually not too bad right now. A lot of people waiting for a transit bus. This is, yeah. Look at this, bro. What's going on back here? I don't even want to get too involved. It's crazy again. Oh my God. Damn, bro. Oh.
One after another homeless encampment, and all the money disappeared. It's been 5 years since the state auditor found California allowed $32 billion in unemployment fraud after ignoring repeated warnings. Yet the auditor just found that billions in EDD fraud continues. This is the biggest fraud scandal in U.S. history, says Representative Kevin Kiley.
Amounting to a minimum. Mr. Speaker, I want to take a moment this morning to examine the biggest fraud scandal in the history of California and probably in the history of the United States. And that was the fraud in unemployment benefits that occurred in California during the COVID years, amounting to a minimum of $32 billion. $32 billion. Now, it's easy to kind of throw these numbers around and lose sight of what they really mean. So just to put that in perspective, that was half of the education budget in California at the time. It's more than the entire state budget of the vast majority of states in the country. Now, the reason that this scandal bears scrutiny right now is threefold. First, a state audit just found 2 weeks ago that this unemployment fraud in California is ongoing to this day, continuing to cost taxpayers billions of dollars. Second, the Senate still has not passed a bill that we passed in the House to hold some of these fraudsters accountable by extending the statute of limitations. And third, the Newsom administration, perhaps sensing the political peril following the events in Minnesota, has come out and absurdly tried to deny responsibility for this scheme, for this scandal, and even more absurdly tried to blame the federal government for it. So I want to go through exactly what happened, because I believe it is important to show why taxpayers were so thoroughly defrauded and to assure that this does not continue to happen going forward. The reality is that the fraud that occurred in California took place despite the repeated warnings of the federal government. And it was uncovered not by state officials, but rather by local prosecutors. On November 23rd of 2020, county prosecutors, a group of 9 of them, disclosed what they called the most serious fraud, significant fraud of taxpayer funds in California history. Now, at the time, they said they could only prove $1 billion. So $1 billion was already the biggest fraud of taxpayer dollars in California history. Now we know that it was at the very least $32 billion. Contrary to what the Newsom administration is trying to say now, at the time, the district attorney of Sacramento County, Anne Marie Schubert, said, quote, "We have asked and implored the governor to turn the spigot off." She said the governor's unemployment development office was not doing common sense things like checking claims with prison rolls, something that the vast majority of other states were doing and that the federal government had advised. She said this made the scheme, quote, "relatively easy." She called the governor's response slow and non-existent. She advised Governor Newsom to, quote, "look to other states for solutions." The district attorney of Fresno County, Lisa Smitkamp, said that Newsom, quote, did nothing until the elected district attorneys brought it to the media, adding that she did not think the state has a handle on it. Those were comments made back in November of 2020. The following January, the state auditor came out with a report that laid forward in very precise detail exactly how significant the failures of the Newsom administration were, specifically with their unemployment office known as the EDD. A heading in that audit said, quote, significant weaknesses in EDD's approach to fraud prevention have led to billions of dollars in improper benefit payment. Among the key...
Yeah, that's just getting started, folks. You think Tim Walz is bad? Just wait until you see what Gavin Newsom's done. $76.5 billion in alleged fraudulent spending. A record of failures and deception brought to you by Gavin Newsom.
During the COVID pandemic, Minnesota is bad. Wait till you find out what Gavin Newsom has been doing in the state of California, because a new report has come out that estimates that there's about $76 billion in fraud coming from California. During the COVID pandemic, audits estimate that at least $32 billion in fraudulent unemployment claims were paid out. California has spent $24 billion since 2018 to address the ever-growing homeless population in the state. The homeless population has only increased by 26% since 2018, and they're spending like $100,000 per homeless person. So how does that work? Fraud, scam, $24 billion. Another $18 billion has been spent to build a high-speed train. Problem is, nothing exists. They've built nothing. There's nothing to show from $18 billion. It's like the joke, the high-speed train to nowhere, but you can't even get on it and go nowhere because it doesn't exist. 34% of California's community college applicants, fraudulent. Individuals committing financial aid fraud. California's food stamp program has one of the highest improper payment rates in the nation at 13.4%. But it's estimated that at least 15% of the benefits on that program fraudulent. Where does the money go? Oh yeah, to NGOs, to corrupt people who line their pockets with our tax dollars. Oh, I like this one. California spent $650 million to upgrade our 911 system. No upgrade. Nope. Just $650 million. Poof. Gone. Oh, and here's some tea. This one's juicy. Gavin Newsom's former chief of staff was indicted on 23 counts of bank and wire fraud in November 2025, tied to campaign finance abuses. Oh, and this adds to the growing list of insider dealings out of Newsom's administration, because it's all fraud. It's all a scam for them to get rich off of. It's almost like Trump hired a group of very, very smart people to find all this fraud, waste, and abuse for a reason. It's almost like it's real and it's worse than we can imagine and it needs to be exposed. But no, the liberals hate that. They're going to twist that narrative because they're on the receiving end. So they're going to somehow brainwash people into burning Teslas and rioting in the name of continuing fraud.
And that's what makes it so crazy, is that they are rioting because we're exposing the fraud. It just makes them look even worse. California promised high-speed rail from San Fran to L.A. and got nothing.
Them that they would. We are here in California to see what $15 billion looks like in Gavin Newsom's California. Not one train track! In 2008, it sounds like he scammed, frauded, and lied to voters by telling them that they would have a high-speed rail by 2020 at the cost of around $20 billion. Well, it's 2026 and they've already spent $15 billion and not one track has been laid and not one train has moved. move. The other problem with this, besides this absolutely being empty and literally being a train to nowhere, is that people want to be able to travel cheaply, and the cost of going on this train might just be as much as going on an airplane. So they might not even really have customers. I believe that they are going to go over their now estimated budget of over $130 billion. As you guys can see, nothing is happening here. They have a concrete block blocking off the road and this gate so that nobody can access it. But again, it's just a big concrete blob. I really do wonder if I will ever see it in my lifetime. I think that it's more probable that we're going to build lunar bases than this high-speed rail to work. We're going to drive about 20 minutes from here where there's another...
Yeah, the train to nowhere continues. Looks like Gavin Newsom not only has these fraudulent daycares running in California too, but he's actively working to hide the records. Yeah, remember we brought that to your attention the other day? Well, there's more.
After what's been exposed with the daycares in Minnesota, I'm a licensed private investigator in California. I started looking into state records and I found ghost daycares. These are places where the state inspectors showed up. There would be 28 kids enrolled and there were no kids there in the middle of the day and in the middle of the week.
All right. So a ghost daycare. Is that something Gavin Newsom could say, all right, we'll try to shut that down? Does he cooperate when you start raising this?
No. In fact, today, it got word from the governor's office. There's been a directive to actually shut down public access. So right now, you can't even search the own state website to look into these ghost daycares, but I have found a workaround.
Okay, well, we don't want to tell the governor that you found a workaround, but it does sound like he's trying to cover his tracks. Like this is a cover-up.
That's what they're doing. They don't want the public to investigate, so they lock down the sites and access to it. Benny Johnson, Gavin Newsom spent $24 billion on solving homelessness. That adds up to $170,000 per person, homeless person in California.
You realize, though, maybe in California. And if that is true, much of the credit will belong to my next guest, Benny Johnson, host of The Benny Show. Benny, great to see you. When did you realize that California was worse than Minnesota?
Yes. So California is the fraud capital of the world. And here's how you know. Let's go ahead and look at just one program in California that the state budget, which is enormous, is supposed to solve. The homelessness crisis. Now, you can travel to any city in California and you will find tent cities, broken down RVs, people living on the street, people defecating on the street, people behaving in dangerous ways towards children and towards families and towards the tax-paying citizens of California. You shouldn't allow that in America. California knows that this is a problem. Gavin Newsom knows this is a problem, and they spent $24 billion on homelessness in California over the last few years. Brian, that's $160,000 per homeless person spent by the state of California. Now, where I'm from, in Iowa, $160,000 will buy you a home. You could just buy a home for every homeless person. This is what California has done. Now, what happened in the course of spending that enormous amount? Has homelessness gotten better or worse in California? In fact, homelessness, the rate of homelessness has grown by 30,000 people. It's skyrocketed. Travel any street, go anywhere, but I would advise you, Brian, to go ahead and look right here at the map of Gavin Newsom's city. This is San Francisco's public defecation map. This is what one of America's once greatest and most beautiful cities, one of the most prosperous and richest cities, has been turned into.
So here's the through line they don't want you to see. Fraud, sanctuary policies, NGO money pipelines, record destruction, media silence. This is not incompetence. It's an ecosystem. Minnesota cracked first. California is next. The same federal forces tearing into Minneapolis are preparing to turn their attention on Los Angeles, San Francisco, Sacramento, and other cities and other states. That's why Newsom is panicking. That's why the media is preemptively calling these investigations dangerous, because they know it's coming. And once the audits, indictments, and subpoenas hit California at full scale, the narrative won't be about politics anymore. It'll be how deep the fraud ran and who got rich while the state collapsed. And this matters because California is not just a state, it's a blueprint. What happens there spreads everywhere, just like it started in Minnesota. And right now, that blueprint is fraud, decay, and accountability. Accountability-free governance. $32 billion stolen through unemployment scams, $76 billion alleged fraudulent spending, $24 billion burned on homelessness with nothing to show. Ghost daycares draining public funds, $100 billion train to nowhere, and a governor who watches it all collapse while hiding records from investigators. The fire that started in Minnesota has spread west in the same patterns, the same protection rackets, the same refusal to answer questions. Gavin Newsom watched Tim Walz fall. He knows fraud's the career killer. The investigations are coming. So should Gavin Newsom face criminal charges for fraud and mismanagement? Yes or no? Drop it in the chat. And represent accountability. Hit the Next News merch shop. Link in the description.
The system controls information. Information control is power. They don't want you to see this. The truth only survives together. They don't want this shared. Share this now.